Happy to have you today. Bless you. So, last evening, Gary, Maddie, and I were invited to our first outdoor gathering. It was at the memorial stone for Netzer Shitrit, Avi's son, on the second anniversary of Netzer's death, who died at 26 years old of leukemia in Israel. So Avi wasn't able to be with him. Avi and Michelle Whelan were married a few years ago in their backyard on a beautiful sunny day. Netzer's memorial stone, let's have a look, Sue, is made of metal, stone, and wood and sits in the dunes on Sconset Beach. Isn't that beautiful? They designed it for months and months. Kneeling before this piece of art, celebration and mourning filled my lungs with breath, the kind of breath that allows love and sorrow to abide. There was homemade bread and brownies, music, children, and dogs. And though we were all masked, our eyes were dancing to the rhythm of the drum, the strum of the guitar, the beat of our hearts. I'd forgotten what it was like to see another again with my eyes, to watch chests rise and fall with breath, to chit-chat about simple things, pets and jobs and wind and children. There was no need to go deeper. The depth is where we have all climbed out of to get there. Welcome to another Sunday where we meet one another where we are, loving, accepting, re-inviting one another into the love and sorrow that connects us all. Welcome. And now we have a happy birthday for Liam to sing. So let us unmute yourselves and fill the screen with the cacophony of your lovely open hearts and voices. All right.
Here we go, yeah.
Here we go.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Liam. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, Maddie just left. Maddie was lying on my feet. She just got up and left. All right, my loves. It is time for the chalice lighting. I'll remind you of the words in case you don't have an order of service. With this flame, we renew our commitment to justice, peace, and compassion. Please join Gary.
Well, with this flame,
we renew our commitment to justice, peace, and compassion. And now we'll sing again our affirmation as printed in the order of service. From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty and good be sung through every land, by every tongue. Amen.
It is the time in our service where we greet one another. But before we do, Mohammed, Mohammed, before we do, Mohammed will introduce himself. Please, Mohammed, tell us a little about yourself, my dear.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed, and so many hands waving. I'm a TED resident in New York, based in New York. And I established a company not too long ago called Abe's Eats. We produced the first ever halal and kosher interfaith meat to bring the Muslim and Jewish communities together to collectively eat together, but also work on tackling anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim bigotry across the United States. Love to speak to you more about it in my little talk, and looking forward to our conversation in the Q&A.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's a blessing and a joy and an honor to have you. Listen to Mohammed's TED Talk. You surely won't be disappointed.
Thank you for having me.
Anyone else today who's new or returning after a long hiatus who would like to tell us or remind us of your name? I think it's just us chickens today. Anyone? Did I miss anyone? All right, my loves, take a moment now and say hello to one another.
Hi, Randy.
Hey, Colin.
How are you feeling, Randy? Hi, Brad.
Hi.
Morning, everyone.
Hi, Sharon.
Morning.
Morning, everybody.
Hi,
John, this is great.
Hi, Gabrielle.
I love hugging Susan. Hi.
Tyler, so nice to have you with us, Randy.
What's the official Susan count this morning?
Hi, Sarah.
Gabrielle.
And Kat, what is that count? Who's there?
Good morning, Nigel.
2 or 9.
Kat.
I've been saying hello and my mute is on. Sorry. Hello.
Hi, Lydia. Nice to see you.
Tyler.
Hey, Sarah.
Hi, Amy Stillman.
Hi, Amy.
Nigel. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Sue Mintonen.
Hi, Mohammed.
Hi, Mohammed.
It's like an adult romper room.
Miss Jane.
All right, my dears, I'm going to mute you all, but you will have time to be together again. Don't despair.
And it's time for our first hymn. This morning, we'll start the day with number 168, One More Step. And I'll remind everybody that we stay muted for the singing of the hymns. You can find the words and music in your order of service. These recordings, these are pre-recorded. They're made by the choir and myself during the week. We are always looking out for new voices. The recording process is pretty simple. Please get in touch if you're interested. We'd love to have you. 168.
Mohammed, these songs are on our website if you'd like to find them, my dear, and sing along with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, the words are all up there on the order of service. Here we go. I'm sorry, I got myself out of order. We're going to start with number 121, We'll Build a Land.
done. Filled my whole heart up. Thank you so much, Nigel and choir, for once again inspiring and bringing joy and music to us. And Cheryl, you have a poem today, my dear, if you can unmute yourself. Cheryl, are you here with us, my dear? Sue, could you ask her to unmute in case she's here? I'll ask you to unmute, Cheryl. Now you can just say unmute. Does that work? Good. All right, my dear. Nice to have you, love.
Thank you. The Wall by Lynn Unger. She wakes in the night crying. What's the matter? I'm still wallowing up from sleep and grumpy. Something scary. What's scary? I've tried to layer my voice with sympathy, but even to my ears it sounds thin. The wall. Why is the wall scary? It makes me sad. Honey, go back to sleep. There's nothing to be scared of. This is, of course, untrue. The ice caps are melting under a growing hole in the sky. By the time she's grown, the pandas and gorillas will probably be gone. Children with no sense of purpose carry guns easily had to school, and most of us pretend our pleasures have no cost. The wall is as good a name for this rift in the world as any. And oh, sweetie, it makes me sad too. Even at 2 a.m, she deserves a better answer. Sometimes we need a cry to jolt us out of sleep. I give her the best, the only response I know. I'm here, honey. It's okay. We're all here.
Oh, Cheryl, you read that so, I'm filled with tears and you read it so beautifully. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Please join me now for a time of reflection and meditation. This day, weary of too much isolation and sorrow, weary of walking a land no longer familiar, weary of weariness itself, we ask for hope. May our suffering bring us toward one another with understanding, comfort, and kindness. May our suffering unlock our hearts until we can see the suffering of others. May our suffering be a prayer, knitting our voices together on the wind, placing a blanket on the shoulders of another to warm them on their way. May our suffering awaken the hope we long for surely right here is where we are, and where we are crowded with others whose feet are worn from walking this path. Look up. Another is walking right beside you. Take their hand, ease their way, ease your way. Suffering done in companionship heals. Amen. Deep breath. Use this moment of silence to just reset yourselves. The talk from Mohammed is coming soon. Just take a deep breath, put your feet on the floor. Know that you are in a place where people love you, and just feel that calmness. May the joys shared and unshared here today continue to bring you light and hope, and may the sorrows shared and unshared today feel lighter because shared in this loving circle. Amen.
And now it's time for our middle hymn. Now we'll sing number 168, One More Step. And as we sing, I invite you all to imagine that we're all singing together. We are all singing together at the same time, lifting our voices up, united in rhythm and harmony.
Thank you. Thank you for that reminder that we are all connected. And in that spirit, Mohammed, it is up to you now.
Thank you, Reverend Linda, and Sue, who's going to click through the slides because I had some technical difficulties earlier today. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thankful to be spending this wonderful day with you. My name is Mohammed, and I'm going to take this time to tell you a little bit about my work. And then we'll dive into a conversation. I hope we'll be able to go back and forth about what makes movements successful. So we can, as we can see in the next slide, in 2016, after witnessing a 57% rise in anti-Semitism, a 91% jump in anti-Muslim bigotry, I wanted to bring my friends over for dinner. So spoiler alert, the dinner happened. Knowing that if we can bring these two communities together who are facing the same level of hate, same type of hate, we can create a stronger collective voice to bring about some changes. My first step was to ask the community what it was that we could do to combat this rise in bigotry. In 2010, I worked for the World Cup in South Africa, and while about 3 billion people were watching Netherlands and Spain in the final, I was in a township just outside of Cape Town, where I was working on using the power of soccer, of football, to help teach youth there about HIV/AIDS health education. And in that process, I realized not necessarily focusing on what it is that I want to solve, but rather using that as a tool to have conversations. So it was there that I learned just to go and not to just present my own ideas, but rather ask people what they want. And gain that feedback to co-create tools that help people to be compelled enough to take on the changes that they wanted to see. So having that framework to ask people for their thoughts, I thought in this case, a dinner would be a perfect idea, because here we were trying to combat this rise within the Jewish and Muslim communities. And I thought, all right, let's host a Shabbat Salam, which is just a play on words of Shabbat Shalom and Salam Alaikum. But sure enough, I had a problem. I began to receive calls from the progressive from the conservative Muslim and Jewish communities who said, hey, does this event offer my dietary options? I eat halal, or I eat zabia halal, I eat kosher, I eat galut kosher. And I realized at that moment that I needed to take a step back and really think about how to create the most inclusive space possible so that people can really celebrate who they are, but also acknowledge their differences. And how can you really celebrate your commonalities and only separate yourselves because of your dietary differences? It just wouldn't make sense. So before the dinner even began, I needed to understand what this all meant. And as someone who grew up as Muslim American, best of all, I grew up in a neighborhood in Paramus, New Jersey, where on my street, I had a Chinese pastor to my left. I had a Reformed Jewish family to my right. Across the street, we had a rabbi. Next to him, we had a Sunni Muslim family, and we were Shia Muslim. So our community was very diverse, and it was a safe haven from what was going on at that time. As a Muslim American post 9/11, it was very difficult because not only myself, but my immediate family had faced a great deal of trauma. We were attacked, and it was frustrating and it was dangerous, but I was raised with the understanding that they don't know any better and that people are fearful of what they do not know. And that can stay with them their entire life unless we take the responsibility of informing. So in the pursuit of hosting this Shabbat Salam dinner, I thought, why not bring this halal and kosher process together? So I went down, up and down the Pacific coast in my 1979 VW bus, as you saw in that first illustration. And I began to speak with religious leaders and food experts, asking if I can bring this halal and kosher process together. And long story short, as you'll see in slide 3 and 4, we produced what we call Interfaith Meat, which follows the most orthodox forms of dietary laws between these communities. But of course, we didn't want to just be seen as offering a meat product. Rather, this is more symbolic of a larger conversation, a larger movement that we wanted to create. But in this case, what's interesting about Interfaith Meat is the fact that if you follow the most orthodox dietary laws between these two faiths, you're creating something that is ecologically very friendly compared to everything else that is on the market. Not only are you creating a 2-in-1 product, which allows both communities to be able to eat from the same plate, which has immense amounts of symbolism, but you're able to reduce food waste. You're able to reduce space. You're able to create a narrative that allows people to go into a conversation that's very important if you want to show unity. Right? How can you talk about the commonalities that exist if your foods separate who you are? So what proceeded to follow was Shabbat Salam being hosted across the country, not just by myself, but by people who raised their hands and said, "Hey, I wanna participate. I wanna host." And as more people learned about our work, more people wanted to host more events. So we created a Yalla Yalla bus tour that you can see on slide 6, or Cut the Beef, which became a Muslim Jewish comedy show that you can see on slide 7. And we began to produce a variety of programs because we wanted to attract a variety of demographics and understand how each person in different aspects of their life begin to identify with their faith and also with the challenges that their faith may have in the larger American narrative. So today we've hosted more than 2,000 people across the country. And while of course COVID has put a damper on our in-person programs, we've been able to go on line and produce content in different ways, as you can see in slide 8, producing a video showcase and whatnot. And really, the ultimate goal here is to create sustainable ways for people to get to know each other, to sit across the table and simply learn from each other, to fight that level of fearness that comes from really the ignorance of not knowing what is going on. Because change does not just happen by marching on the streets, right? That form of activism has immense value, but it also happens by listening to uncomfortable conversations, by not being behind keyboards, but being face to face. And it happens when we get to give our most valuable currency, which is time, to hear someone out and understand the variables in their life. Now I want you to kind of go on this journey with me. I want to take you on a tour to meet communities of activists who are able to change our world. They all have key qualities in common in the ways they showed up, in the ways they tackled larger institutions, and how they eventually created sustainable change. So our first stop, as you'll see in slide 9, a very popular picture that you're probably far too familiar with, was actually when Martin Luther King was first arrested for driving 30 miles per hour in a 25 zone. But I think we can take a guess and understand that he wasn't arrested for driving 5 miles above the speed limit. He was arrested because he used his car to help people continue to boycott the Montgomery bus system. Slide 9, of course, is of Rosa Parks. But a little context, most people think of the Montgomery bus boycott and think of Rosa Parks and the community that stood behind her and called out for change, which was this, the Jim Crow segregation of our bus system and how it needed to end. And they simply wanted equality. A big ask, but a very simple one. But what few people know is actually Joanne Robinson and the NAACP stepped up and they created this protest, but they had actually wanted to protest 9 months before, and it wasn't necessarily Rosa Parks that was the trigger for it. In fact, they wanted to have a 15-year-old girl be the face of the protest because she had been arrested in the same exact way as Rosa Parks had. But the reason why they chose not to go with her was because she was pregnant. And they felt that a 15-year-old girl who was pregnant would be bad for the movement. And these were the critical decisions that are also being done that gets lost in history. But the key one that I want to focus on for this particular example is that in our history books, we constantly teach that this movement in history is about, as slide 10 shows, people walking and them sacrificing, not taking the buses to go to work, which is crucial. But a very critical part of this component is the fact, as we see in slide 11, is that they bought station wagons, individuals and collective churches, and they created a carpooling system. The Lyft, the Uber of 1956, if you will, right? And it was by drivers who copied the same routes as the bus system, who were able to keep this sustainable. They kept it sustainable through many different ways, right? To be able to get the cost for fuel and for the maintenance of the vehicles, they charged, but then they also actually sold food that a lot of people within the community didn't know that it supported this particular cause. So they found a way to have a sustainable system built for us, by us, if you will, that allowed them to continue that boycott for 382 days. Because these drivers were not, they were not just social activists. They were not just on the streets. They were not just walking. They found a way to also become social entrepreneurs. And this is a critical component that when we look across activism, it's this beautiful moment where activism interlaces with the understanding of making something sustainable with the options that we have. So keeping the buses empty for that long was really the reason why they were able to create the change that they wanted. And it allowed the civil rights movement to take a massive boost. You know, the fact that, wow, now the community sees nonviolence can work, community activism can work, social entrepreneurship can work. It was MLK's first organized event. It pushed him forward as a leader, but also transformed how we see the civil rights movement today. Now, I want to, before we hop into our next stop, I want you to take a moment and think about the most recent protests, whether that's BLM, whether that's Occupy Wall Street, whether Nancy mentioned the voter issues in Georgia that I'd be excited to hear the conversations in the future about. Are they sustainable? Why or why not? Do they include just activism, or do they include other forms of entrepreneurship, other tools that allow it to move forward? I'm just going to take a couple seconds here for you all to think about the movements that you're seeing and participating in today. For the second stop, as you'll see in slide 12, I want to head over to 1967 in Pittsburgh, where a decade later, African-American leaders are now beginning to meet with community members who understand how outlandish these forms of racism are and what they're dealing with. And to take the next step into activism, we need allies, right? We need allies within our workspaces. We need allies in our schools. Enter Peter Safar, a critical care pioneer who was asked to find a way to help Black communities improve their health, the health of the patients before they got to the hospital. So he made a deal with the African-American community around him in Pittsburgh. And he said that, hey, our department will offer ambulances, but only if he could help the African-American community train them, many of them who didn't even have a high school diploma. So his program not only ultimately offered better medical care, spoiler alert again, but it also created better jobs, and it created ownership within the community. It was his program known as the Freedom House that became the gold standard for paramedic training and what we know as the EMS today. A quick note about just community ownership, and this goes back to my days in South Africa, is, you know, Freedom House is the gold standard, but where have we seen great intentions without community ownership? A classic example is the volunteer religious trips to, say, Ethiopia or Rwanda or South Africa or any of these countries, where then the agenda is rooted in a bit of savior complex. And the classic example is the water well, where communities from abroad come into a developing or a quote unquote third world country, and they build a well. They spend thousands of dollars building a well. They pat each other on the back, and then they leave, only for that well to be deemed useless by the communities a couple months later, because a 50-cent part is broken, and because no one is trained in fixing the well, because there was no ownership taken by the community, there was no community-driven development initiatives put in place, that well is now lost. It sits there worthless. And not only does it become worthless to the community, a trust is broken between people who come from the outside of the community in to do something with amazing intentions, but they didn't necessarily build the right infrastructure to communicate with the people who they call as beneficiaries. The beneficiaries and stakeholders constantly need to work together. Never creating this ownership for the community is dangerous. If you want sustainable change, you get people involved, no matter at what level. We do this every day as business owners with customer feedback. We should be doing this every day in our political system. Questionable if we do it every day, but why not do this when we think of social impact and social change? Now, before we head to our next stop, I want you to take a moment again and think about the most recent protests. We asked before, are they sustainable? Are they using a variety of tools beyond just activism? Why or why not? Now let's ask, are they led by the community? Are the problems brought up by the community? Are the solutions brought up by the community? Or are they brought up only by a single few leaders? Now let's take a moment and hop towards same year, 1967, and go to Houston, which you can see in slide 13 and ultimately slide 14. And this is where Muhammad Ali boycotts the draft to Vietnam, inciting religious reasons. Now, for context, it's been about 3 years since he's converted to Islam, since his name is Muhammad Ali. He's defeated Sonny Liston now. He's become the world heavyweight champion. All eyes are on Muhammad Ali. And despite not being able to box for 3 years, he was able to come back and defeat Frazier and George Foreman. So he was not only the face of boxing, but he played a considerable role in the economics of the sport. The fact of the matter is, he sold tickets, right? Airtime. And therefore, he used his spotlight in the best way possible. At the height of his career, he sacrificed what he was still, and he was still not necessarily just the leader, right? In the case of the civil rights movement, in the case of Muhammad Ali, what was interesting about the 1950s and 60s and 70s was that there were multiple leaders pushing forward equality in so many ways. And that's what it takes for people from multiple angles to give up their individual fame or money for the movement. And an example that didn't necessarily work so well, when we think about San Francisco 49ers Colin Kaepernick, reflecting the same energy, not against Vietnam, of course, but against police brutality. Sadly, Kaepernick was no Muhammad Ali. He was an amazing representative of the cause, but he could not have created the same level of impact unless he was to bring on board other athletes as well, who would be able to stop the economics aspect of the sport. So if LeBron James would have essentially done what he had done, if Serena Williams would have done what he had done, there could have been a very big difference in the change that they wanted to see, not only just in the NFL or in sports leagues, but larger in the conversation of police brutality. And so this third example is about collective leadership. We know about the MLKs, but for every MLK, there's hundreds of people doing immense levels of grassroots level work to make it possible. So reflecting on these examples, it's important to remember that we cannot learn our way into transformation, but we have to do our way into transformation. Unfortunately, with each passing year, the level of activism, the level of social entrepreneurship, the level of being able to create positive social change is actually becoming easier. We are in the most inclusive time in human history. We are actually in the most peaceful time in human history. We want, but the only dilemma that seems to get in the way of really building change in the ways that we want, whether that's for human rights or the environment or whatnot, is actually our understanding of time. We want things right now. We want it right here. And we think that social media actually helps. And we can argue a lot about whether that helps or not. It does to a certain degree. But that tweet or that status update is part of a very saturated world of voices. And unless it continues to apply the same formula that we know from past history, whether that's grassroots level activism pushed with collective leadership, whether that's community ownership, whether that's social entrepreneurship that leads to sustainable movements, then that tweet doesn't necessarily matter. So most of all, it's about, on top of all these things, it's about the mindset that Martin Luther King did such a great job making communities of people believe. And that is, just because it's broken doesn't mean it's unfixable. It's really about the hope that Reverend Linda just spoke about. It's the hope that drives us forward to build a longer table and not a taller fence. Thank you so much for your time. And by the way, we can go to slide 15 and 16. I lost track of that. But looking forward to having a larger conversation with you all today about creating social impact, and creating, I should say, just larger impact in general, because it is not just about the social issues, but also the social, the economic, the environmental, which is what we call the triple bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. You're so fluid. I just loved how you were able to present so many ideas just right from your heart. Thank you so much for that uplifting and that important invitation, really. Thank you so much. I know we'll hear more from you in the talk about at the end of the service, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Linda. Really appreciate having this conversation with you all. Looking forward to learning from each of you.
You know, as you were talking, Mohammed, I was thinking of Rabbi Breton Granitor, who is the rabbi of Sharat Hayam, and we share space with here at the Unitarian Meeting House, and also Dr. Qureshi, who is Muslim, and we share space with him for Muslim prayer every Friday in the summer. And I was thinking of A Beats, and perhaps we could even have a dinner together. So I will be back in touch with you, because these are the kinds of ideas that both of them, Rabbi Gary and Dr. Qureshi, really resonate with. So you'll hear more from us. That's the joy of connecting with us. You really can't ever get rid of us.
Well, thank you so much for offering the space to have not only this conversation, but to hopefully in the future be able to break bread with you all. We'll love that.
Thank you, Mohammed. We look forward to it. It's now my pleasure and honor to lead us in our gifts we bring. It is the time I ask you to be generous with your resources. And so much of what you said, Mohammed, we have so much to do as Unitarian Universalists who pride ourselves in being social justice activists. And you reminded me there's so much to do. There's so much more listening. There's so many more tables to build. And I think that this community, as you said about religious communities, that your example was of them being not being allies. But I do believe that a religious community has the possibility of being an extraordinary ally, because there's so much faith and hope and love between us. And you have inspired me, Mohammed, to think, how can we use that faith and hope and love to be better people together, to be better allies, to be social entrepreneurs? So thank you for that. And today I ask you for generosity to this community that sustains us, that challenges us, that loves us, and that asks us to be more. Sue?
I am pulling up, this is the Unitarian Church Nantucket website, where you can click contribute if you would like to offer on this Sunday. Down below, there is a step-by-step guide if you want to make your pledge, and there's also a video walkthrough. If you need extra help beyond that, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help folks. At the bottom of the page, there's the PayPal link. But when you go to the top and click on our friend contribute, or, oh, I should mention, you can click receive updates if you aren't getting our Sunday emails. When you click contribute, it brings you to the Tithely portal, where you can put in the amount, choose what it's your gift is for. You can also make it a recurring gift if you don't want to have to remember every week. And then when you fill out your information, you can also choose to cover the fees so that your entire gift comes to the church rather than the church paying the processing fees. That's it for here. Nigel?
And our offering today, musical offering anyway, is a lovely piano piece by Aaron Copland called Piano Blues No. 3.
Oh, my goodness, Nigel. That was exquisite. Every note.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's lovely. That's a lovely piece. Our final hymn is number 1014, Standing on the Side of Love. This one's a rocker. And as we're singing, just imagine, if you're swaying, everybody else is swaying at the same time. If you're singing, everybody else is singing at the same time. And someday we'll be able to do this all together at the same time. Like you were mentioning at the beginning of service, Linda, we kind of forget what it's like to feel each other breathe and hear each other's voices. So I look forward to that.
the promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are standing on the side of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are standing on the side of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound, corrupted by fear, unwilling to hear, denying the beauty we found. We are standing on the side of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are standing on the side of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are standing on the side of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are standing on the side of love. We are standing on the side of love. We are standing on the side of
Beautifully done. That hymn was built during the gay rights movement, and it was the UU's decision to stand on the side of love and support gay marriage. So that's the history of that song, and this is the blessing. Bless you all. Mohammed reminded me that fear is always in the way of love. And I think about the ways that one can mediate fear. And the only way I know how to get there is remembering the ways I'm afraid and how I was able to move that, never by being lectured, never by being told I was inadequate or wrong. It's always been through love and listening. There is no other way to eradicate fear. Thank you, Mohammed, for lifting up this time of remembering, of inspiration, and of calling us to the fear within ourselves and offering that listening and love and moving it aside so that we can show up for those to whom we disagree. Bless you, with whom we disagree. Bless you, dear people. You are a people of love and faith, and I adore you. And now is the time for the chalice extinguishing. The words, if you don't have them, are carry the flame of peace and love. Until we meet again, please unmute yourselves and join Gary in saying these words.
Carry the flame
Peace and love
Until
we meet again.
And the postlude today is a piano piece from our hymnal, actually, but it's a really lovely instrumental piece. This is number 1057, Go Lift It Up. And I'll say the words for you here just briefly. Go lift it up, love bless your way, moonlight, starlight, guide your journey into peace and the brightness of day.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Thank you, choir. Thank you, Sue and Leah, who's out there doing beautiful work with children, and Shirley, who's always here, whose duties are always expanding. We have her scraping a fence in the backyard now. Thanks for everyone. Mohammed, thank you. Thanks for everyone here who shows up with open hearts and minds.